Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Listen in as we discuss all things business, growth and marketing with business owners, thought leaders and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, founder of Roundhouse, the creative agency, Saul Edmonds.
Oh, hi everyone. Welcome to the Grow Your Business podcast. Today I am speaking with Steve Plummer. Steve, how are you today?
It's all good, mate. Happy to be here and looking forward to sharing some stuff with you and your listeners. So yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, no, we got a few interesting things I think to talk about today. But before we get into all that sort of stuff, for people who don't know you, would you be able to give them just a little bit of a overview, bit of a annotated history about who you are, what you do, and what you get up to, and maybe even what you like to eat? Who knows?
What I like to eat.
I've never said that before. That just popped in my head.
Okay. Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Steve Plummer. I'm a marketing strategist and copywriter. And what that means is I help people connect themselves and their businesses to their ideal clients using the power of words. And, words are significant in everyone's life. The words we say to ourselves, the words we say to our customers. And that's my area of expertise. And I've been pretty successful at it over the last 15 years or so. I've written in 63 niches. And I've written for everything from, startups to B2C, B2B, and an ASX list top 200 company retained me for 18 months, just before COVID. So it was, I've had a significant career in the marketing direct response world. However, I did start my working life in words. I started it as a teacher. I spent 20 years as a high school teacher, faculty head, and deputy principal. And I left that. Now, when I say that, no one ever asks, well, why did you leave, right? Everyone goes, yeah, I get it. Well, I'll tell you, I'll be very open about it. I was miserable. And that's the bottom line. I mean, it was, people say, well, how did you do it? I mean, I had four little kids. We had 4 under 5 at one point. I had 4 little kids and a mortgage. And I guess it was risky, but I was burning out. I was leaving home at 5:30 and getting home at 6 and having nothing left for my family. And so there had to be a better way of living. And I was also a freelance journalist at the time, just in my tiny little bit of spare time I did have. And I had to find a way to. I wanted to be a writer and make using words a living in my profession, and here we are, Saul, having a chat. That's the long loopy story, or not loopy, to close the loop of the story of why I'm here. And does that answer? Is that give enough of a background for us to kick off?
Yeah, I reckon it does. I reckon it does the job just fine. And it also, I think it's because when I'm talking to people on the podcast, I always kind of am especially interested in that first part. Like some people, like yourself and other people, I kind of know part of that history, but hearing it again on the podcast, it's kind of funny, I guess, in a bit of a meta sort of way, like us using words to describe things and you talking about the importance sounds probably to a lot of people everyone uses words. But at the same time, I think it actually is kind of underestimated the power of words. And you constantly hear in various kind of circles the power of words. And once again, people are always yes, of course, that's because we speak to each other. But I would be sort of interested as a first question, when you were a teacher, it seems to me to some extent, also being in that sort of space myself, for many years in a range of different sort of areas, talking to people and using words and then writing, whilst they're obviously not the same thing, there's a few fundamental kind of aspects, like you being a teacher and trying to express something to like a group of people, even though it's not for marketing purposes or for their business. Have you ever reflected back on that and gone, oh, wow, there was an interesting correlation there that I didn't sort of see at the time because I was in the middle of just teaching a class or, try to do that. Have you like often or ever, sort of looked at it in that way, or you just like moved on and now you're doing marketing?
Let me firstly respond to that by taking a really sharp pin and popping the bubble of, well, duh, everyone uses words. And here is my experience, and I mean no disrespect to anyone in business, but universally, business owners are terrible at using words. And terrible at using words to sell. And I'm not talking about salespeople. Salespeople are often very good face-to-face, but ask them to do the same thing in the written word. And universally, my experience is that people need support with that and people need help with that. And there's a very simple reason for that is that, when we're in school, and I know this because I was an English teacher for a dozen years, even though I was in high schools for 20 in admin type roles. The reason for this is that in school we are taught to write to convey information and talk to write to get a good grade, right? And that is a whole world away from writing to sell. And what I found was the more grammatically correct, like I'd been indoctrinated to be with my marketing, my copywriting, the more grammatically correct and getting good marks, the worse the sales message is. And
interesting.
Yeah, you can basically throw out 80% of what you learned at school because copywriting, words that sell, writing to sell is a very specialized field that when you get good at it, it's a massive leverage point in your business. I just want to be really, really clear that most people do not know how to write to sell. And the reason they don't know how to write to sell is that we just simply haven't been taught, right?
Yeah.
We've been taught to get a good grade. The only good grade in business is sales, right? Two very different things. So, that's probably the first thing I will say about that. And let's be really clear about that. Let's take a step back from the busyness of business and understand that, it's almost a free tool, but no one knows how to really use that free tool, of words that sell. It's a huge thing. And I all the businesses I work with, I can just see such relatively minor things that if you make certain changes, it changes the numbers. And, as you know, Saul, being in marketing, it's always a numbers game. So business owners should be looking for leverage points to allow them to change those metrics. And one of the big ones is words and words that sell and knowing how to use them effectively. Yeah.
I think like the comment they had before about the, duh was in sort of response to the fact, like a lot of things, people make all sorts of assumptions about how easy and straightforward because we do it all the time. So therefore it's easy and it's kind of, but it's especially then relevant, like the way you were explaining it, like to burst the bubble is what, I don't know whether that would be shocking to people listening or they'd go, oh yeah, no, that is probably true. I'm not very good at writing, but I'd probably ask you to be interested to get your thoughts on this too, because what I would assume from that, just thinking about, say, how in maybe like a similar sort of scenario, someone who does, say, like what's the difference between doing a logo design that looks great, it looks really clean, it's visually sort of interesting, but still for some reason it doesn't actually capture that message that it's supposed to capture. Like, and it's like using words in a particular way or using them in another way that's going to capture it or not capture it. Like, what's then the difference between those things? I mean, I would, this is just sort of an off the cuff thought. I'm not sure haven't thought this through properly, so maybe this is it's completely off the mark. But like I would assume there's an element of that, given what you were saying before about things being grammatically correct and being, or say if it's something visual technically correct, doesn't translate to it being the right message. Is that element of that trying to capture the feeling, and if you're going too hard on the technical side, it can have an undue influence, like on what you're actually doing. Like the focus is kind of on sort of the engineering of it, like or the engineering of the grammar, that it's going to look great or it's going to technically be great, but doesn't have that soul to it, or the spirit that the message needs to have. What do you think about that? Is that, because then someone listening, I would imagine, would go, okay, well, Steve's like obviously a good writer and he obviously knows grammar. So then what's the secret sauce? How does he do it?
So, well, that's a multi-layered question, Saul. Thanks for throwing me a simple question early on. So
yeah, that's okay.
Right. Yeah.
Well, hey, you're a writer, Steve. You should be able to handle this.
Absolutely. So let's go back. You mentioned about logo and all of that and that the visual sort of stuff. I'm not saying that it's unimportant, because your brand and your brand story is important. It represents who you are. However, I would also push back on that and say that no one ever bought anything because of a nice logo. A logo complements a strong sales message. A logo is not a sales message. And so where you need to start with your messaging is your market. What are their key problems? And how do you solve it for them? Because here's the thing, right? I didn't get up this morning, Saul, thinking about your business. I didn't get up thinking about the fish and chip shop down the corner of my street. I didn't get up this morning thinking about the pool company that I might be hiring in 6 months' time. I got up thinking about me and my problems. And that doesn't make me a nasty, selfish human being. It just makes me a human being. We all get up in the morning and think about the stuff that we have to do and the problems that we have to solve today. And I think in a lot of marketing, and there's a couple of reasons for this I'll get to in a minute, but in marketing, we sometimes can lose sight of the fact that we're selling to human beings. We are so bombarded with so many technical things. We are selling to human beings who have emotions, who have problems, who have desires that we as people in business need to fulfill. And we need to be leading our messaging with the solutions to the problems, not with ourselves, because we're the only ones who get up in the morning and think about our stuff, right? It's a uniquely human thing. I've got my problems and my list of things to do today, like everyone else does. So that's one thing I'd be really encourage people to think about. Does your messaging focus on the end user and their problems and how you solve it? So that's probably the overarching thing. And what I'm saying doesn't negate the importance of branding. But like I said, a logo never sold a thing, whereas a good headline might hook someone in to a sales message. I'm not saying you don't need a logo. It's important to have your brand presence. But the words you use, for example, on a website, that headline, that top third, you've only got a few seconds to really grab them. Otherwise, they're gone. If you don't grab them at the start, it's over. And so that's where words are really, really important, for example, in a website or in any particular sales message.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, it's all a part of the myriad of how all of that works, that people read and look and then feel like as a result of like all those things.
Yeah. Can I just add this too, Saul? One of the here's the thing about being in business too. A lot of people in business are really, really good at what they do, right? And that's just why they're in business, because they've got an interest, a love, an enthusiasm, and excitement about something, a solution that they're really good at. What people are often not trained is how to actually sell that, how to use the written word to sell that, right? They're two very different skills. And if you're really good at what you do, it can be a challenge to sell what you do, because you're so good at it, you're so immersed in what you do. It can often take a separate set of eyes to distill that message down so that people will respond to it. So it's a double-edged sword in many ways. Of your expertise, the great thing that you do is very separate to how you sell the great thing you do.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, like, nobody expects you or I necessarily to be a great plumber or a great sparky, or anything like that either.
Yeah, please
don't. What you mean you're not, Steve?
No. Like you, I've got a long list of things that I say to my wife, you don't need to keep reminding me of it every 6 months, right? So
yeah, I mean, it's lovely. I love the fact that, like, the people sometimes think that I have more skills than I actually do, so, but it's certainly, yeah, it's 100% right though. But people's emphasis on, I guess, because it's small business too. I mean, that sounds sort of like an accurate comparison, like I just said, in that funny kind of way. But at the same time, things that with creative thinking and other stuff is quite different then too. So so what would you say? Like, say we talked a little bit about, I guess, marketing from a copy and words point of view, but could you, like, speak to, I guess, the subject of, like, how you, as somebody who uses words, like, given, I mean, we were talking about there's other things involved, there's like audio and there's logos and there's visuals and all that sort of stuff too, but like, when somebody, say, comes in, actually I'll talk about print specifically too, even though it's not as widely used. Like, where do you actually see the importance of the written word as that very first important sort of impact that it has on somebody when they're looking at, like, a brochure, like the thing that people are seemingly quite immune to, or are they? Or is it just because there's not good copy, like, on those things? Is that the reason?
That's part of it. It could be you've got to have the right message in front of the right market in the right media. If you've got one of those three things, so right message, right market, right media, one of those things are out, then it doesn't matter how good the copy is. It's not going to work. But if I can just take a step back from that and talk just in general terms, do you remember the movie Jerry Maguire? Saul, do you remember that? Remember that? So there's a scene, that's the Show Me the Money movie, right? Remember Show Me the Money, and there's a scene towards the end of that movie, and I don't know if you recall it, but Renee Zellweger and her sister and some of her friends were in their lounge room having a bitch session about men and how men are terrible because Tom Cruise had gone off doing his working thing, and had abandoned the wife kind of thing. And anyway, Renee Zellweger gets up from the bitch session, goes into the kitchen to get tea for everyone. As she has left, Tom Cruise opens the door and he says, "Hello, I'm here to see my wife." And they all look around, right? And then she comes out from the kitchen and he goes over to her and he says, that beautiful romantic, you complete me, without you, I'm nothing, and blah, blah, blah. And she says, "Oh, shut up. You had me at hello." Remember that scene?
Yeah, I still do. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like that with any bit of marketing that you do. If you don't get them at hello, it's over. So much of the effort in marketing needs to go into that headline, and you've got a couple of seconds to hook people in that headline. Because if it is a brochure, it doesn't capture them in the headline, they'll throw it away. If it's online, either in maybe in an email, the subject line, website, whatever it might be, that headline's not spot on, they click off. And so that the headline is the most important thing, because if you don't get them at hello, nothing else matters. And the more I speak, on podcasts and speak from stage, which is where the teaching skills come in handy, by the way. But, the more I travel around and talk to different business owners, the more I'm seeing today, and it's interesting you mentioned offline, the more I'm seeing today in this rush online digital frenzy world, the more I'm seeing a lack of knowledge or lack of understanding of the fundamentals of what gets people's attention and what makes them buy. We're kind of, I think, our humanity is being lost in the technology of things. Obviously AI has come along now, and AI is good for about 80% of copy, but it's the 20% that makes the old 80-20 rule. And, it can give you speed, it can research for you, but unless you know the fundamentals, your message is just going to be really ordinary. However, I do like AI. I use it. I love the different word patterns it gives me that I may not have thought of. But, and I'll give you one example about that. There's a list of, 10 words, the 10 most successful words in the 100 most successful newspaper ads of all time. So someone did a study back in the 90s that looked at the most successful newspaper ads and the words that appeared in those headlines. And there are 10 words which I don't want to overstate it, but kind of work like magic, that if you put those words in your headline, they increase the power of your headline. Now, I'm astounded that something so fundamental is not known to people who are in marketing. It's almost like, that's old and boring because it was back in the 90s. Therefore I don't need to know it. And here's the thing, right? I understand that thinking, but it's also inaccurate thinking, because the thing that has not changed is human beings. We still sell to human beings. And so I say hasten really slowly about throwing out those things that work. Why? Because they work. And people listening, I'll read out the list of, the top 100 headline or the top 10 headlines to use. It's you and your. They're the two most powerful words to use in a headline. How and new. Who and money. Now people. Want why. Like if you can weave those in to your headline, it gives it more power. And I'll just give you an example. If you're a pool company, pools made to order. If you just add the word your, pools for your backyard made to order, see how it makes it more personal? Just that one. I mean, it's a really terrible example, but it was just off the top of my head. But you add in the word your, and all of a sudden it makes it personal to me as a human being.
You and your family.
Yeah. Yet the thing is, we have, in my view, we've lost some of that connection to the humanity and what it takes to sell to a human being. So, if you get nothing out of our talk today, just remember that we're human beings selling to fellow human beings who have all of those emotions, and the things that worked in the past, the you and the your, the how and the new, the who and the money. Now people want why. If you can weave those words gracefully and elegantly into your headline is going to have much more power. And if your headline has much more power, you've got much more chance of engaging someone and making a sale eventually.
I've noticed, I don't know about you, but I find it really curious, being a fan of podcasts, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I do the podcast, because I generally like podcasts. I like hearing what other people have to say, sharing their stories, but I've found it's sort of interesting with what I guess used to be the general perception, of people, that is like shorter, faster, quicker, more punchy is better. But this sort of trend, which has been now happening for however long, and seems to be very popular now, of like long form listening of, or even from like the web design point of view, is you had this sort of trend where everything was above the fold. That was the most important thing. And there's still obvious, it's still relevant, but, the trend partly driven by phones and devices and scrolling, plus also just, design has changed, that longer pages are much more popular. And, at the end of the day, obviously you have to have good content and good words there. Otherwise you shouldn't probably have like a long page. If it's not relevant, just like fill it up just for the hell of it. I mean, It's kind of silly. But then with podcasts too, like us having a long form conversation, all the biggest like podcasts in the world, like the Joe Rogans, like Friedman's, etc. They all have these very long conversations. And I found that curious. It's like that flies in the face of everything that I wager. If you talk to a lot of people on the street who like would run their business, they would probably still, say, yeah, it's like better if it's like faster or more punchy or whatever. And I mean, in saying that too, it's not always one or the other. It's not this or that every single time. There's, but I found that curious, because what that kind of represents to me is that people know intuitively, even if they aren't an expert, they respond to things that are relevant to them or interesting. If they didn't, they would tune out or they would go somewhere else. Like, would you agree with that? Like, what are your thoughts on that shift?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I think it's about responding to what humans want and how humans interact. And I actually want to pick up on a point you made before. You mentioned brochures and offline stuff, and you and I have heard the same presentation from Matt Alderton, about, and he's a very successful entrepreneur, and he says he's got 7 P's for a successful business, right? One of them is promotion. The first of those P's is excuse me, is the first of the promotional things is he calls pavement. In other words, pound the pavement. Offline brochures, books, letters. How much have we abandoned such a simple media for the sake of speed and cost and agility with our online things? And that's a wide open field, because hardly anyone is doing anything with that. And I actually saw some research. This is really interesting. I saw some research out of the US just yesterday, that Gen Z is responding really, really well to direct mail.
Yeah.
Now, if you had asked anyone, millennials, Gen Z, are they going to respond to direct mail? No way. But
of course not. Yeah.
Like letterboxes are empty. But here's the thing, right? If you do it well, it can't be like traditional direct mail where there's just a phone number to ring up to order. It has to have a QR code and then have some online interaction. So you take them from offline to online.
Exactly, yeah.
And that is really, really effective. But so just in amongst all of that, and look, things come and go in cycles. We all know that. I would really encourage everyone, can you add offline to your marketing mix? And I always advocate a multi-channel approach. Now, it doesn't mean you've got to run out and learn TikTok videos, although you could if you wanted to. But where can you add another channel? It might be do more email. It might be more SMS. It might be letterbox dropping. It might be a bigger shock and awe pack to try and win your bigger clients. Like, where can you add an offline component or just another channel to what you're doing? Because that mix of things is really important. And to loop back to your original question, I think it goes back to that principle I mentioned before, Saul, that we're still selling to human beings. What do human beings want? How do they respond? And to test things accordingly. And it's really, and the irony of us talking on a podcast, the technology thing about offline stuff is not lost on me either, right?
But of course, yeah. But the world is but yeah, I actually, because being like as a designer and working with people like yourself, for years, and working in print and online and with apps and all this sort of stuff, I feel like the world, it's a really interesting time for people's consumption of media and people making it too, because I feel to some extent I've seen, not in some huge grandiose kind of way, but I've seen this sort of shift, and part of it is probably that people don't have access to things like in COVID. All of a sudden, the poor old print industry had a pretty hard time. No one was wanting to handle things or give physical things over to people. But then, like you were saying before, there's these certain cycles, and I think that was exacerbated a bit by the absence of something, and then people going, and then also a catalyst with them going, rethinking, I'll try this again, I'll try, something new, like you were talking about. And I've seen a rise again, interestingly, in people wanting to do print things, which I'm finding really curious, but with a different emphasis, like you were saying about in its own lo-fi augmented reality sort of way, where it's kind of an interaction with a print object. And there's a lot of more creative things you can do with that too, in information that links to certain pages, that expands on it, using it like a print version of a landing page, and all sorts of different stuff, which it's like the evolution of print, that it's still a static piece of media. But that kind of represents to me, and what we're saying before about podcasts is that people do actually, when there's good messaging and something that grabs them, and that they actually have a willingness to actually read. Yeah, sure. There's heaps of people that just won't ever do that because they just don't really like reading or listening. There's all those people. But if it is good, people will actually do it. So could you speak about I guess just your thoughts on authenticity? I know that's a pretty big, broad sort of question, but specifically where that comes to what's your approach? Say you're talking to me, I'm a person who hasn't given much thought to their words or their messaging. In fact, hardly at all. Say I'm that sort of person, and you're what do you do when you're talking to somebody to find out specific things about their business, then for you to convey that in words, to sort of extract or to understand what that authenticity may be, or how that weaves into what you're going to convey to people? What do you actually do broadly to do that, Steve?
Yeah, I have a process where in part of that research, where I speak to the owner, I look through all of their current collateral, what customers are saying about them. It's quite an in-depth thing that is time consuming. But you've got to do that to understand both the business and the market that that the business is selling to. Because if those two things don't meet, it's a bit like I said before, it's over. So I've got quite a process where I go into that to help a business see their authenticity. And that takes like I said, a considerable amount of time. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. Hang on. We can edit that out. We've got the technology, right?
No, that makes it more authentic, Steve.
Okay. Well, I did just mute stop, so I didn't hurt anyone's ears. So I do have a process I go through to uncover things like that, and it can be really enlightening for a business owner, as we go through that process, because it's what I find out in that process that then informs goes out to the market, because like I said a little while ago, if you don't match your messaging to the market in the media that they're in, it's over pretty much. So there is an absolute process there. To address the issue of authenticity, I'll give you a story from my particular world. I probably mentioned it to you. So I published a book earlier called The Influential Marketer. You can get it, quick plug, you can get it at theinfluentialmarketer.org. I'm happy to sign a copy for you. Now, with that, that book is really helpful to business owners and marketers, because instead of being I think it meets the old school versus new school, because we're so bombarded with information. And I don't know about you, but business and marketing books can be quite heavy, and they're very sequential. I've got to start at the start and get to the end. By the time I get to the end, I don't remember the beginning, let alone the middle. That's just kind of, because we've got so much information. So I structured the book in a lesson per page per day. So it's a bite-sized chunk. You can read in 2 or 3 minutes to get an idea, confirm things, whatever it might be. Inspiration. A lot of people use this as an oracle. They just open it. It's non-sequential. So you can just open it up and get some ideas or inspiration.
That's the teacher in you coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, totally. Yeah.
I like it. That's good.
And anyway, so to me, and this is my authenticity and my truth, to me, a book is a physical, tactile experience. And people say to me, oh, look, if it was on audio or if it was on Kindle, I'd buy a copy, because that's how I consume information now. And I said, that's okay, you don't buy it. Because my book is an offline copy only, for the very same reason that who hasn't got a Kindle or some book that's on screen that you've looked at the cover, maybe the first page has scrolled a bit, and then it's just disappeared into the ether of your files. So I wrote the book so it would be a resource that would sit on your desk. It's a nice, heavy, thick thing, 1 day a page, 1 day, so 366, 1 day per page. So there's a lesson for every day of the year for you. And I want that to be a resource that sits on your desk. And so people say to me, oh, look, I'll buy it if it's on Kindle. When are you going to put it on Kindle? When's it going to be audible? It's not. It's a book. It's a physical experience. If that doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. I'm all, I make about $10 a book. I need your $10, right? By the time I print and ship it, I make about $10. So if that, if that doesn't resonate with you, then I'm okay. So that's an example of my authenticity. That's how I show up in the marketplace with that book. And people say that's costing you sales. I'm okay with that. That book obviously isn't meant for those people who do the 99 cents on Amazon to become an Amazon bestseller. I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in a real resource that would really help people, rather than just get a badge as an Amazon internet bestseller kind of thing. That's an interesting point. Yeah. That's an example. And I heard someone say a dirty old sock can become an Amazon bestseller. If you do it right. You can gain that algorithm, by the way. Because the way they've set it up, you've only got to win a category in a certain period of time to get the badge. So it's a little bit of false credibility. So I didn't want to play that game. People say that's cost you. Okay, fair enough. But I wanted to show up as I wanted to show up authentically. This is how I can help you without going into the high fees that a copywriter charges. Here's everything I've learned over the last 15 years that you can apply to your business 1 day at a time. And it's a book, and it's going to sit on your desk and be well thumbed. And I mean, you can't see it, but you can see mine. It's got highlights and dog-eared and the post-it notes in there. And that's the kind of book that I wanted, because it would be the most helpful for businesses. And, and we are coming into some tough times, and, I wanted to help as many people as I could in the way that I wanted to help them. And so that, I guess there's an example, Saul, of, you mentioned that authenticity.
Yeah, that's a great example.
That's my line in the sand of, we are a very switched on technical. I mean, I guess it comes from a little bit from me as well. As a writer, I'm always in front of a screen. I love it when I get away from a screen, right? And so something is important to me, I will go and sit in a chair away from my screen and read it, often with a blank piece of paper and a pen next to me to jot down ideas. I try and get away from the technology as much as I can to let this, because I'm an analog being, right, trying to make sense of a technological world. So I don't dismiss, deny my analog nature, because that's who I am as a human.
That's a really interesting point. And I guess too, you could also say there's a lot of things that I guess people would very clearly accept sort of straight away, that someone wouldn't, do a digital version if you've got an artist making a painting. They're not necessarily going to be like scanning that in and turning it into a print straight away. But then, some people are going to do that in various ways, and that's all more widely accepted. And I wonder, is that because I'm sort of asking this question, rhetorical question, kind of openly, I guess, in one sense, is that because the technology driving it and people's fascination with like the use of technology, I feel like it's got more to do with the fact that of the fascination with the devices that people use than that it's print or digital. I would say, like, I've often thought, like, you see how technology changes. You've got, sort of great new reading and sort of scribing tools like Remarkable and like other things that have more of a paper feel and all that sort of stuff. And I often wonder, like, I sort of, not that I'm a futurist, because I'm not, I'm not a futurist, but I often sort of like wonder about how things are going to evolve. And I often have this feeling that at some point there's going to be, it'll come full circle again, and you're going to have a much more book, like, I'm not sure how that's going to be, but I feel like it's coming more and more full circle, because once again, that's a fascinating thing to me, is you went from books, to people going, no, we're going to scrap books, and then everyone on to things where they just read on a screen, then people going, and then there's this constant push now, which I find really interesting, this constant push of the technology being driven in such a way that it feels more like a book. So what's that about?
Why not just make it a book?
Don't you find that interesting?
Yeah.
Like, is that, I've often thought of that, and I've thought of that when I've seen things too. It's like, why do I find it fascinating? Well, kind of obvious, because books are nice, because books are. So my prediction is, and we'll see in, fast forward, 1 year, 2, 5, 10, whether, tablets will evolve in an even different way, where it's much more like a book, like even with some sort of way to flick, because people sort of do crave that. They lost it very quickly, like in all the bookstores. I think it was like Folio Books and different places like seemed to just go almost kaput, like overnight, however many years ago. They were all sort of crashed, poor old stores. And but then there's this constant, sort of craving to get back to that. And I thought it's so kind of silly in one respect, but a logical thing too of people's kind of ingeniousness of now going, okay, we had this great feeling. Some people go, well, I don't really want books, but I love the feeling of books. And I love, like, even the writing on it, of it feeling like I'm actually writing. And maybe that's good, but there's a lot of sort of grey areas in there too, I suppose. But just getting back to some of the things that you sort of talk about as well, like on your website, and I've sort of heard you talk about things. When you talk about someone's business genius, and you talk about that particular subject, can you just, I guess, elaborate on that for people listening about what you're referring to?
Yeah. And again, I think this is really interesting, Saul, because it gets back once again, we've spoken about it already, but it gets back to our humanity. What is it that our us humans, we're very connected, even though we're very individual. And I think it gets back to the humanity of us in that someone's genius. What makes you you? What makes you different? Because one of the things that I always look for when I'm working with the business is how to not inauthentically, but authentically help you show up differently that reflects your individuality and your genius, because the very surface level of any marketing message is product and price. We have great products or services at great prices. Well, everyone says that. Everyone says that. So how can you be different to that? I mean, of course, no one wants to pay too much for crappy products or services, right? It's almost a given that's a very baseline, yet that seems to be all that some businesses, maybe because they don't know better, maybe they haven't thought about it deeply enough, but that's where they come from. Product and price, product and price. How can you get away from that? What is it about what you do that's a deeper conversation that you want to have with your market? And again, I have a process for helping a business uncover what that genius is and then messaging around that. But, I would encourage everyone to think, do we just do product and price? What is it about what we do that's very different? Because one of the things that, everyone I think will resonate with this, there's a sea of sameness out there in the marketplace. I'll go a step further. There's probably a sea of fairly high quality sameness. With the advent of digital technology and now the advent of AI, there's kind of a sense that everyone's doing really good stuff now. But so how do you stand out in amongst all of that noise out there? And for me, that's about finding what is it that makes you unique and different. What is it that is your genius point? Because I firmly believe that every human being and every business that is a reflection of the human being who started it has that genius point. And if we can market from that genius point, there's a really good way of standing out that is deeper than, more connecting than, more authentic than, more compelling than product and price. We sell great products at great prices. Please, everyone does. Otherwise they're not going to be in business for very long. So, what is your genius? What is your your point of difference? That is, that is compelling to the market. The other thing that a lot of people say is, I'm very passionate about what I do. Well, I don't like working with people who are unenthusiastic about it. I don't want to work with someone who hates what they do, right? So again, that's a little bit of a given. And I guess too, if you look at the etymology or the origin of the word passion, it's suffering. The passion of the Christ. It was the suffering of Jesus, right? So I don't want to suffer for my work. So I'm wary of that word.
But it is very hard in small business though too, Steve.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Yeah. Hey, I run a small business. I understand what you're saying. It's so what can be different than product, price, passion? What's different about you? Because I'm sure there is some element of enjoyment / enthusiasm for what you do at market prices. And you want to do the right thing by people so you serve them well. So what else is it about you? What do you do differently? And if you can't answer that, maybe there's some scope there for you to do a bit of thinking over the Christmas break about how you're showing up in the market. What genius do we bring to the marketplace?
How do you talk to people? Like I have I guess my own ideas, like when you were saying that, which is, whilst it's kind of rhetorical, I'm sure people listening to are like, what's my answer to that? But what would you say, or what have you maybe said to people who, when you say that to them, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. Because I would say, like, this is just from personal experience, whilst I may not have said exactly what you said to people, that general conversation of, of going deeper and finding these other things out. There are probably a lot of people out there who don't quite understand like how to find that. It's like you're on a trip and you know how to get somewhere because you can see the signposts, or you got Google Maps, or you got something, you know how to get there. But if you don't know how to use Google Maps, or you can't read, or it's hard for you to find it, like, what do you do? And I think I feel, just your thoughts on this too, for people listening, are there any little, I guess, keys or sort of trigger points that can help people actually start to think about that in the way that lets them answer
it? Yes, there is. And you're dead right. And I'll say this too, it's difficult to have a deep conversation or deep thinking from a surface level. So you do have to take a step back and, look in downtimes, in slow times, in times where you're away from your office, your computer, right? Those are the times when ideas come to you. So it's a really good point you make too, Saul, in that, well, we just sell rakes. How can that be different to anyone?
That's right.
And so, yeah, I totally get it. There's stick
What's
of wood.
The deeper meaning there? It's like, how much deeper can I go?
Yeah. So there are stick of wood with, prongs at the end, right? They're all some version of that. So, which is a very valid point. So what I would say in that instance is, well, how do you do things differently, or how can you do things differently so you don't just show up as a rake salesman or saleswoman? Is there something in the mechanism that you do when you work with a business to find out, or a customer rather, to find out what they want? Is there some thing that you do after sales that is different to others? So, think of mechanism, think of, look, one way to uncover that too is to go back through all your testimonials, all your Google reviews. What are people saying about you?
How do they actually feel about you? In sort of reverse engineering it, you mean, like from hearing it from the other point of view? Because you're probably right there too, because we're always in our own heads, aren't we?
Yeah, totally. Look, and this is a really interesting point too, Saul. I love the saying, you can't read the label from inside the jar. You just think about that for a moment. You can't read the label from inside the jar. Now, everyone who is in business, almost bar none, is inside the damn jar, right? You have to be to make the business work. So how can you step out of that so you actually can read the label, as it were, quote unquote, but you're actually seeing what's going on, that a customer would see? Because, let's face it, business owners, small business owners in particular, they put their heart and soul into it, right? And it's a very busy occupation. You're constantly solving problems. You're under deadlines, all of those sorts of things everyone knows that a small business owner deals with. And that can be tiring, right? That can be exhausting. And when you're on a treadmill of that, it's hard to look at your business from a different point of view, because your hands are so dirty doing the day to day. And so that's why I said before, can you take a step back and have a look at, maybe a starting point for you is to look at what customers are saying about you. What are the themes that are running through that? Now, I don't know. And when I work with a business to uncover their genius, I don't know what the answer is. That has to come from within them and what they do. But that, to me, that is a starting point. What do customers say? What difference do you make in their lives? Now, I'll give you an example. I'm working with a cleaning company, a cleaning supplies company in Brisbane. They had, this is quite obvious, but they weren't leading with this. They weren't using this as a point of difference, but they had Australia's fastest online ordering system for cleaning supplies, way better than anyone in the market. It was genius what they did, but they weren't leading with that. And so that's a really obvious one. But it's still a valid example. You might, and it's the same as the rake example. It's just cleaning products. We're just moving cleaning products from our warehouse to their, to John's cleaning service down the road. But what is the genius in what you do? And for them, it was understanding the pain points of the market. And one of them was the speed of supplies. The worst thing a cleaner can do is turn up and go, oh, damn it, I'm out of X, Y, Z. Oh, now I've got to go to get online or, ring up and order, and it's going to take, a day, 2 days to get here. I need it now kind of thing. And so that they got around that. And so that was their point of genius. And so sometimes it's not easy though, right? In the rake example, but what are you doing that is different? What are you doing that taps into your particular genius to solve a problem for someone? I'm not pretending that it's a simple question or a simple answer, because it's not.
Yeah, because I think I just listening to you say that, especially about say like the rake scenario. I think maybe it's important for people listening, because they might be, they might not be, but they might be hearing the word genius and sort of making assumption, because how people they will hear one word, the power of words, they like latch onto that, and then they're like genius, that equals X, as opposed to going like, genius then also could be hypothetically something deeper that they tap into philosophically that's got some real world application. Yeah. Or could it be, this is more like, I guess for people listening to maybe help them think about those answers and not be too funneled down like a certain path of thinking and going, it's got to be something deeper, and I can never find that. So therefore I can't find anything, and therefore just going, like you said, I think that's like a brilliant example, is that genius could be they made this tool not with some great philosophical inspiration, but they made this tool, then you almost reverse engineer that into what you're talking about. Because like genuinely, I mean, I could see that's obviously like a really great thing to lead with. And then and that's just as valid or as like relevant, as like anything else. Cause like just returning to what we were saying before is there's going to be like heaps of people who will just be like, I just don't know what he's talking about. Like in that, I can't find something that's more meaningful. I don't really understand it. I don't like, thinking about stuff like that. As opposed to, and what I'm talking about. Hey, it's that.
Absolutely. That's right. And the word, it's a really perceptive point you make, Saul. The word genius doesn't mean, and I'm not implying that you're Einstein, right? Although you could be. But it doesn't mean any of us have Einstein level intelligence, right? That's not what it's about. But there is something different and unique, genius-like that you do. Let me give you another example, Saul, of this concept. Market leading businesses, I believe, they market from, and their genius has been able to uncover this, right? They market from a place of the unspoken desires of the people they sell to. Consider that, the unspoken desires. How do you find that out? My goodness, it's not easy. I would love to say, it's a simple 4-step linear process. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do that. No, it doesn't work like that, right? And here's a really good example. I've got a client in the rural space in South Australia. They sell big farm sheds to farmers, right? And, they're 60, 80, 200, 250,000, $300,000 sheds, right? It's not a small sale. And I've been working with them for, 5 years now, perhaps. And it was about 6 months, because let's face it, a farm shed is a farm shed, right? It's 4 walls, it's a roof, it's got purlins, it's got joists, it's got, but it's a bit like a bigger rake, in many ways, right? And about 6 months working, because I am struggling to in working with them initially to find that leverage point, right? And about 6 months into it, I was having a conversation. We have weekly meetings, and I was having a conversation with the owner, and she said, oh yeah, that's what they all want. They all want to be the respected guy in their district, and blah, 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 blah. And I went, hang on, stop. She said, what? I said, you mentioned respect or something. A few sentences. She went, oh, respected farmer. Yeah, they all be the guy in the district that everyone looks up to, who people ring, when they've got a problem with their irrigation or their soil or their cattle or whatever it might be. They give, Farmer Bob a ring because he's the guy that we know, right? Will give us the right advice. And she said, that's secretly what they all want. No one ever says that, but that's what they all want.
Yeah.
And so there's hardly a message that goes out now to that market that doesn't have those words in respected farmers. And so the business now is kind of almost like we're the guys who service respected farmers. And now by extension, if respected farmers buy their sheds, the guy that everyone looks up to, what does it say for all the others? They should buy their sheds, right?
Yeah, if the flow-on effect.
If it's good enough for the respected guy in the district, and so, and I'll just give you an example of a headline that I've used with them. The pre-head was something like, respected farmers all agree, and then February is decision month for landholders. And here's specials for February kind of thing. That was kind of the structure of the leading with that. But that whole thing of uncovering their genius was they actually service respected farmers. They are the go-to company. They're good enough to be good enough for respected farmers, which is a really interesting concept, right? That's better than, hey, come and buy 4 walls and a roof for a good price.
Yeah.
Very different conversation.
Yeah, because it's interesting too, like having a couple of sheds now myself. I'm just like, just normal sheds. It's funny as soon as you were saying that and you were saying the 4 walls, and I was like, yeah, but knowing now, being a proud shed owner myself, I can now, like, it's actually, like, seriously, I mean, maybe I should get into the shed marketing game, because I have like a completely different perspective on sheds because of the importance they have, like, for housing, or, the conversations that we've now had about having these sort of sheds and going, let's open up all this scope and we're going to be able to do this. We'll split this part off. And I was like, that's so funny, like, not really funny, but just the irony of that. We had these sheds and we're like, yeah, we was really happy to have sheds, awesome. But now all of a sudden that they're there, they've become this sort of housing of almost ideas that it's because there's nothing in them yet, obviously. So at the moment they are just a housing of ideas, and but it's what they represent. It's like things that represent things that are seemingly on the surface, and then, but this underlying thing, I think that's kind of
now you're getting into the genius zone, Saul. You're dead right.
Yeah, and that's where, I think, for people, because it's like, helping these sorts of conversations, us talking about this, maybe that's then also, it really does often have to be an exploratory conversation that isn't even at some point specifically targeted. Like you saying, there was that, lady that had that little bit of, insight. I was like, oh, they all want to be the respected. I was like, that little bit of insight, which is kind of just like, say, local knowledge, that she would never have thought this is a little gem that's going to lead to, you then thinking about it in the right way you need to. Those things, in the visual, like in the visual design sort of sphere, or with art or stuff too. wife and I have often referred to that as like the happy accident. It's like things that you come down a certain path, and because you're going and because you're exploring things in a different way and sometimes in a random way mixed with a bit of structure, you come to a point that you wouldn't never have arrived at unless you had been going through this maybe like tangential way, like you then ended up having that conversation with her. You heard this bit, which could easily have not have happened.
Yeah.
And then it's only in retrospect that you go, oh, I actually like came to this interesting point, but the source of it was this little tidbit of information. And but it shows the importance of, to me, that kind of shows, like it highlights the importance of little details that are like easily overlooked. And ultimately, like for you too, the importance of like that sort of single word or like the way it's, sort of structured, or like you were saying before, in including you or yours, or, these like tiny things can completely transform like the meaning of it, which I find really fascinating too, like in your language, how you can have, or you can even have the same words. You can have like exactly the same words, and you say them to somebody, or you write them and they read them, and then you say them and they're exactly the same words, and they're interpreted completely differently because there's intonation, or you use, or you, I'm like a great example. Well, actually, I saw just yesterday, we went for a drive to pick something up, and my son was like, and he caught, I think it was a pie shop. And it was like this place called Worst Pies. And I was like, nah, that didn't say, and it was like, it did. And I said, was it spelled, W-U-R-S-T? Yes. And he was like, no, it was like worst, like as in the worst. And I was like, but immediately, and then we had a short debate in the car about whether that was good or bad. Whether that was like good. And I thought, well, ultimately for me, the first thing it did was it grabbed my attention, and then I was reflecting on it really quickly, and I thought, I didn't have any bad feelings about that. And he was like, yeah, and I was like, well, yeah, ultimately the proof's going to be in the pudding if you went there and they actually were the worst pies. But straight away there's humor. Like, and my wife was like, the surname is probably Worst. And then and I was like, yeah, because that's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah, that's right. Otherwise you'd call it Brisbane Pies or something, right?
Or you wouldn't make the funny connection and then just call it like Shitty Pies or Worst Pies.
Yeah.
Because you just wouldn't.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting. A couple of things I want to share around that. Number one, you've got to be really careful about using humor in marketing. It's good and it's fun and all those sorts of things, but if they don't get it,
it's risky.
If they don't get it,
it's risky.
Forget about it, right? The other thing, here's a little secret about, just to finish off that genius conversation, a little secret about doing that, and you touched on it, Saul. I'll just language it differently, is have your marketing radar up. Quote unquote marketing radar up. In other words, be alert for those little things. And you're very perceptive about, I could have missed that. I could have been thinking about the next thing that she was going to say, or how we're going to crank up sales, or whatever it is. And I'm not saying I'm perfect, but thank goodness I had my marketing radar up at that time. So I'd really encourage everyone listening to adopt that. And you might say, well, how do I do that? Well, just say to your subconscious mind, Steve, today have your marketing radar up for good ideas. If you just do that every day, train your mind, you'll be surprised at the different things that you hear. Now, everyone listening might be going, oh, this is woo-woo nonsense, and I get that. Just give it a go, right? What's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that can happen is you're not going to name your business Worst Pies, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would also, I 100% agree. I would also just add to that too. And once again, this is like a visual thing, but it can be easily applied to any kind of creative thinking about anything. And in fact, it's often something that like engineers, the people who are making things like industrial designers and people do a lot of, and that is like that initially. And it's quite hard for people to get past this because people have very specific ideas about what they want and how they're going to do it. And that is that all ideas initially are good ideas, even the most terrible ideas. Like everything, if you're in a group of people, especially, this is more relevant, and you're all talking, one, so there's no arguments, two, so, everyone can just like have their say, and so that someone doesn't pipe up and go, that's a terrible idea, straight away. Everything is fine. Everyone go, okay, I'll take this, then bring it all back together and then filter out things, combine things, because that's the only way you're going to be potentially open to that sort of that randomness of, say, that situation that you had. If you were at some point in the conversation, you also, if somebody else was talking to a similar person and you had a particular agenda, you're going down a certain path, and the very act of doing that will sometimes completely block off any possibility of something else cropping up, which, yeah, you can't plan for that. You can't have a grand plan for that. But as a part of like say if you use the metaphor of, you catch fish by a big net, or you catch fish by, just a rod, and you're going after a specific fish, you can catch a whole heap of stuff. It's going to be heaps of it that isn't any good, but some of it might be useful, or parts of it, some of it not. But going through that process will sometimes yield like real sort of gems. Sometimes it won't, but like that's the process that, it might take a bit longer too, but I think it's really sort of worthwhile.
That's it, because I don't believe she had ever mentioned that phrase before, respected farmers, respected guys in their district. I don't think she'd ever mentioned that before. At least I hadn't heard it before. Now, if my marketing radar had not been up, if I hadn't trained my subconscious mind to be on the lookout for certain things, like you said, I wouldn't have heard it. Dismiss that talking to your subconscious mind as a, actual peril, I think. At the very least.
It's hard though. Like it's not easy to do. I'm saying that, I'm sounding like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. Yeah, look, there's heaps of times where I know I've got a specific idea in mind and I'm blocking other things out, and I'm like, I shouldn't be doing that. But so it's like something you do have to train. But I'm just returning to what we were talking before about, like your book and people and helping people become a influential marketer. I just have a question around that too, is that because there's the world, like in business, you've got business owners who traditionally aren't marketing people, and they then come to a person like you or me or somebody else to help them market their business. But my question is that was the intention of, because I'm sort of making an assumption here, and I want to see if it's right or not, is you writing that book to help like business owners, is that a way for them to be way better, across those core things that they should be feeling about their business, to one, help them if they're doing marketing themselves, but also to better place themselves when they're talking to other people to help them with their marketing. So, they've got this good foundation about, what they actually understand about their business, instead of just going through the motions like for years and years. And was that like one of the I guess maybe not inspirations, but like reasons to help business owners get a better understanding that they may have never like really sort of had?
Yeah. I think two things. One, to give that better understanding, and two, to reawaken, remind of things they've heard and might have forgotten in the busyness of the world. And I'll give you two, because there's so much that I know when I hear someone say it, I go, oh, damn, that's right. If the book can do that and reactivate parts of because let's face it, if you're in business, you're pretty good at what you do. And you've got a pretty good view of the world because you're dealing with people all the time and systems and all those sorts of things. So if the book can help to reactivate stuff you already know, then fantastic. I'll give you two examples. Not long after it was published, a lady by the name of Nat Carroll, she lives at Noosa. Her business is car detailing, and she messaged me and said, "Hey Steve, loving the book. I use the suggestion from the book to write an email to the list. I got a 50% open rate and I think a 32% click-through rate, and we made a sale from that one email. Thank you very much. It's fantastic." And that was page 38. On page 38, I spoke about emails and how to write emails well. So that's one example of how you can implement something from the book. Secondly, maybe about page 60, 65 from memory, I talk about PNR. Now, PNR is a pilot term, as in point of no return. And it's that point of when a jet's getting down the runway, right, they get to a certain point where they've actually got to go through with the takeoff because there's not enough runway for them to slow down, right? So every pilot knows that there's a point of no return on their takeoff. When they get there, they've got to lift off and go. And I talk about that in terms of sales. And I prompt business owners, so what is your point of no return? And do you engineer everything to get the customer to that point of no return? And so the point of no return in business and sales is that that when a customer gets to that point, they're an 80 to 90% chance that they're going to say yes. And so everything should be engineered to get them to that point. And I'll give you an example just in menswear. If you get a guy to try on a jacket, because guys don't shop right, but if you get a guy to try on a jacket, they're 80% going to buy, right? That's just and so everything that a menswear store should be doing is getting a guy to try on a jacket because they know that that's the point of no return. And so, the book prompts you to think about, well, what's the point of no return in your sales process, and how can you engineer everything so that you're getting more people to that point where they're going to more than likely buy from you. So there's different facets like that. And that's not new, that concept, but it might just get you to think differently and reactivate something that you might go, oh, actually, we could actually add or subtract X from our process. And so the book covers, it says 366 cracking copywriting, marketing, and mindset ideas to skyrocket your results one day at a time. And so I've put a whole lot of different things in there about the marketing, about the business, about copywriting. And so P&R is just one example. Do you even know your P&R as a business owner? Do you even know that? And for a lot of businesses, it's like
high likelihood, no. Yeah, that's right.
Holy crap. Because if you don't know that, there's some thinking around that, because if you can streamline everything to get more and more people to the P&R, your sales are going to go through the roof.
It's funny in that, listening to you say that too. Like I'm 100% sure there's going to be heaps of people that are like, I had no idea what that is, but they would have known when it sort of happened in the past, but they didn't have a word for it, and they weren't able to. They didn't have like a way to define it, but they maybe. Listening to you say that, they're going, oh, yes, of course. Like they'll reflect back, and now having a word for it, once again, like in a bit of a meta sort of way, like has that sort of power in being able to define something that's got a certain meaning or represents that, maybe even that, because like this is like us having this conversation, because I'm always very aware that like different language I might use to explain things to people. Yeah, some people are like, yep, understand, sure, no worries. Other people just don't at all. And reminding ourselves, I think all as business owners, like no matter what industry you're in, if you're a plumber, if you're a copywriter, if you're an engineer, anyone, to, using language to market, but also ultimately communicate, like forming, I guess, habits maybe, like that'll actually help you then think about how's that other person viewing or listening to you, how they're actually absorbing that. I would take that, because I'm sort of thinking about it for myself partially too, as we're talking, that if like anything that people actually take, hopefully out of this conversation listening, they'll, get a bit more of a reason why that messaging is important, instead of just going, yeah, I know it's important. I know this is important, but it's not my thing, so therefore I'm not going to, like we all do, about stuff that isn't, on your radar, or you don't feel is important, but it actually really is, like, very important.
Yeah. You're dead right. I mean, that and I guess if there is some level of discomfort around it, it's easier just to maybe ignore it, or think that it's close enough, and so that P&R is a really interesting one though, Saul. Just thinking about that. Yeah. I'll just give you an example from my business. I run a program that's, I guess, the next step up from the book, called Success Lab, and I work with a small group of business owners live on a Monday or a Tuesday, depending which group you're in, and it's a live Q&A. Just you rock up, you throw questions at me. I'll critique your copy, I'll look at your headlines, we might write some stuff together, just workshop some things, and it's live, it's very affordable, etc. Now, I know that the point of no return for me is in my marketing of that. If I get the prospect to download the information sheet, I know that there are probably a 70% chance that they will say yes. And so all of my messaging is around, hey, got this problem, want some help that's very affordable. Why not check out the information sheet? It's called a micro commitment. And if I get them to make that micro commitment, they read the information, there's about a 70% chance that they're going to join the Influential Marketer Success Lab, the live weekly thing. And so that's what I do. I engineer it so that I'm getting as many people as possible to download that. It doesn't. I'm not perfect with it, but it's a level of thinking that I would encourage everyone who's listening to adopt. What is your point of no return? If you don't know it, look at your sales process. Look at the most successful sales that you've had. What made them different compared to the ones that didn't work or did work? So just have a think about what goes on there. And you might say, well, we're a retailer. Well, is your point of no return just getting them into the store? How can you do more of that?
Yeah.
Right? How can you increase? I know people talk about increasing your foot traffic, but if you do it from the point of view of, well, we know that if we can get people in the store and they can see X, Y, Z promotional stand or whatever it is, I'm just spitballing ideas here, obviously, but what is it for you to get? And I've given you an online example and an offline example there. So what is it for your business? How can you engineer things to get people to that?
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, there's a difference between it. Well, I'm not the difference, but it being a numbers game, like say in the real world, foot traffic, equals you get 100 people coming past the store, as opposed to 10 people. You're going to have a high proportion or likelihood of people obviously coming through, and it's a bit like online too. You've got impressions on a website. More impressions equals more likelihood. I mean, like all the interesting thing that I guess, most people might not really think about because it's Google and it's technology, but ultimately all those things are really trying to simulate real world sort of activity and real, human behavior. Like as to that's the whole, and the relevance that things have, and they always have like a ranking system, but all those same sort of rules apply. But like as we're like on the tail end of our chat, Steve, I'll just ask you at this point we talked about it earlier about some sort of awesome quote, could be from you, could be from like some super famous person. What have you got, Steve? Hit me with something awesome.
All right, let's go out there. Hey, we've been a bit out there and a bit woo woo. Let's wrap it up with a bit more woo woo. Here we go. You ready?
I'm ready, Steve.
All right. Words are spells. What are you spelling into your life? And I'm quite serious when I say that. So what words are you using with yourself to create your reality, in your mind? We've all got that little voice in our head. Now, are you talking positive stuff, or are you talking crap that's negative? What are you spelling into your life? What about with your spouse, your partner? What words are you using with your kids? What words are you using with your staff? What words are you using with your customers? And the reason I come back to that is because of that. It sounds woo-woo and all that sort of thing, but words really are spells.
Yeah.
Words dictate your results. So what words are you using? What are you spelling into your life?
Yeah, and it's ironically, of course, spelling, which is...
We did spelling at school, right?
Spelling, yeah. So, I mean, you might know the origins of that. It was whether that's just an amazing, humorous kind of coincidence, or whether the word, spelling is actually, its origins. I mean, you're the teacher, Steve. Why don't you tell me? Why don't you tell me? What would I know?
Well, I just want to say words are spells. Let's leave it at that, right? What are you spelling? What are you spelling into your life?
Okay.
The words you use.
Okay. If it's super secret teacher stuff, that's all right.
That's all right. I don't want to go back level, right? I've left that. Right. Let's, yeah.
I will ask you offline. That's right.
All right.
So instead of saying that too, could you tell everyone what best ways to find you online? We'll have a link in the description too, but what's the best way to find you online, learn about you and everything that you do? Where do they go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you want to look at the book, it's theinfluentialmarketer.org. theinfluentialmarketer.org. Now, a little funny story around that. People go, well, why did you pick .org? Because that's usually used for charities and things like that. Fair point. Here's the real answer. .com was taken, .com.au was taken, right? So that was the only one that I had available. It's an imperfect world. Like I said, I'm not a perfect human being. It's an imperfect world. I'm imperfect. That was the most perfect I could come up with. Influentialmarketer.org is the place to have a look at the book. If you want some free resources associated with marketing, go to the influentialmarketer.org/resources. They're free. You can download a whole lot of those, including a copywriting critique checklist, some training, some technology that I use to test the validity of my headlines. And there's a whole lot of stuff there for you. Otherwise, you go to symmetrymarketing.com.au, which is my site. Or if you want to reach out to me directly, go to steve@symmetrymarketing.com.au. That's my email address.
Thank you, Steve.
Pleasure.
Any parting words of wisdom for everyone listening?
Yeah, just words really do matter. So really be mindful of what you say, how you say it, because they're really important. So yeah, I just want to thank you, and I've really enjoyed our discussion today, Saul.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much, Steve. It was very insightful and really good diving into the realm of words. It's pretty fascinating. I'm sure there's probably a lot more to be sort of said on a range of other subjects too. But thanks so much for being on the podcast today, and thank you everybody for listening again to the Grow Business Podcast. And we will see you again soon. Say goodbye, Steve.
Okay, goodbye, Steve. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Thanks, Saul.
Thanks, everyone. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Grow Your Business. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time here at the Grow Your Business podcast.